Welcome to Mystery Crime Files. Now listen closely. This is an experiment. For 3 years, I created over 200 true crime stories, and I never uploaded them. Until now. You're watching something I made years ago. At the beginning, I didn't know what I was doing. Some of these stories are rough. Some I still think about at night. Whether you want 1 a week, 2 a week, or 3, that's up to you. But if you ever want me to drop a story that is from right now, in the future, or present, to see how I have evolved in storytelling, well, it's simple. Get this video to 1,000 likes. And remember, right now, you're watching me from the past.
Okay, so in 2003, 26-year-old LSU graduate student Carrie Lynn Yoder would end up being a linchpin in catching a notorious serial killer. But she just didn't know it. So on Monday from 9 a.m. to lunchtime, Carrie was at the Life Sciences AG Center on the south end of the LSU campus working on her PhD in plant biology. Then at 12:30 p.m., Carrie drove home and was there for about 4 hours until about 4:30 p.m. Then she went to the Winn-Dixie grocery store on Burbank. Now at around 5:15 p.m. she returned home, and then at 7:45 p.m. she had her last known contact. After that, she went missing. Now the police force and the serial killer task force ended up putting together this huge manhunt because there were 2 serial killers on the loose at that time, both in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So they didn't want to rule anything out, even though at the beginning she just remained missing. Now, one of these serial killers was convicted of murdering 2 women and linked to the deaths of 5 other women in South Louisiana between 1998 and 2003. But he wasn't tried in those cases mysteriously. Now, during May in 2003, investigators have found a match to the DNA samples taken from one of these serial killers' final victim. And unfortunately, it was 26-year-old Carrie Yoder. So even though Carrie plays a small but big part in our story, maybe it gives her family some solace knowing that her DNA helped catch a killer that is suspected of killing many women. Now, we're about to talk about a man named Derrick Todd Lee. And he was a smooth talking charmer who also had a secret life. You see, going back, Derrick, at the age of 13, on November 8th, 1981, was arrested for burglarizing and vandalizing a candy store. And on that same day, he assaulted a woman right in front of his mother. Then from there, 3 years later, on August 8th, he was arrested on suspicion of murdering a civilian, but was for some reason released. He also set his own car on fire in order to collect the insurance money, and then on July 2nd, 1988, Lee was arrested for attempting to rob another civilian, but the charges were reduced and he shortly left jail. So later, sometime in 1988, he met Jacqueline Sims and married her on August 17th the same year in Solitude, Louisiana. Now, their relationship afterward became immediately strained as he kept slapping her and once threatened her father with a gun. Now, at some point during 1998, Lee just snapped for an unspecified reason and just started killing women indiscriminately. Starting with 28-year-old Randy Meebrewer, whose body was never found, unfortunately. Lee then murdered 6 more women in the 6-year span. All the while, he continuously got himself arrested for unrelated crimes and also began cheating on his wife with an unknowing woman named Cassandra Green, whom he would later threaten to kill, then beat, and got arrested as a result. Now, these crimes attracted the attention of authorities, who gave the then unidentified perpetrator the nickname of the Baton Rouge Serial Killer. Now, for a while, Lee was actually suspected as the murderer of Randy Meebrewer and was put under police watch. And they said that one of the main reasons why nobody could wrap their head around him being a serial killer and why he got away with what he was doing for so long is because most serial killers are white. And he wasn't. Now, just to let you know a little more about Lee, this was his MO. He'd be targeting random women who were all successful and in the working class. Now, Lee attacked his victims in their homes, with the exception being Tanisha Cologne, who was attacked near the gravesite of her mother. Then he would kill them through various ways, such as strangulation, stabbing, and even bludgeoning. He would also sexually assault them before their deaths. This is literally one of those serial killers who would stalk their prey, watch their every move, and then strike. Now, it is known that Lee killed 7 to 11 people and attempted to kill another 4 and also assaulted 3 and stalked another. And that's just what we know of. Derrick Lee was sentenced to death, but before his injection day came, he died in prison of a heart attack. Now, Derrick ruined the lives of many women, including his own wife. I think it's safe to say that Baton Rouge, Louisiana is a lot safer without him. Now, in Sycamore, Illinois, there was a 7-year-old Maria who was a very pretty young girl. And she had these big brown eyes and she shined with warmth and intelligence. And Kathy, who was a year older, felt honored to be her friend. Now, they only lived a few doors down from each other on a side street called Archie's Place, or Archie Place. Now, it was their whole world back in 1957, a time when children played hide and seek outside instead of, watching television or being on their phones, and people didn't lock their doors in this Midwestern farm town because, everybody knew everybody else. Okay, so on the first Tuesday of December in 1957, the two girls later in the day were outside, and all of a sudden, an older male who called himself Johnny asked if, they both wanted some piggyback rides. Now, of course, these little kids, they both said yes, and Maria went first. And Johnny asked if they also liked dolls. And, of course, they said yes. So Maria, she ran to her house 3 doors down at 616 Archie Place to fetch a beloved doll of hers and to get the next piggyback ride. But Kathy waited on the sidewalk with Johnny, and he asked whether she wanted to take a walk around the block or go on a trip in his truck or car or bus. And she said, no, thank you. Now, he told her she was pretty, but she sensed it was Maria, actually, that he liked more. So now you got Maria, and she's running down the street, and then she bursts into her house, only to find her father, Michael, in the living room watching a old Western movie. And her mother, Frances, was reading the newspaper. So Maria kind of looked through and she picked out her favorite doll from the toys piled that were right around the door. But her mother suggested that she take an older rubber doll out into the snow instead so it doesn't get ruined. Now, Kathy felt a chill, I would describe it as soon as Maria joined them back on the sidewalk. Because now, it was Kathy's turn to run home because she had to go get her mittens. And she asked Maria to come along, but Maria didn't want to go. And then when Kathy returned just a few minutes later with her gloves, Maria and Johnny were gone. And sadly, this was the last time Maria Ridulph was ever seen alive. Now, the search for Maria and her kidnapper turned into an FBI investigation. Now, an early suspect was John Tessier, the son of a neighbor who the community only described as creepy. Now, Maria's kidnapping made national headlines. Many people were interested in finding this little girl, including the President of the United States at that time, Dwight Eisenhower. Now, according to some sources, both he and J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, asked to be updated regularly on the case because they wanted to know everything. And there was a lot resting on finding her, preferably alive. Unfortunately, Maria's body was found 5 months later and 90 miles away. Now, however, John had an alibi, and he passed a lie detector test. And his alibi was that he was joining the army and he had a train ticket, so there was no possible way he could have done it. No possible way. Or could he? Now, nothing really came of this, and the case kind of went cold. So an unexpected lead came in 1994 when John Tessier's mother, Eileen, made a dying confession to her daughter, Janet. And she said, quote,
"Those 2 little girls and the one that disappeared, honey, John did it. John did it. And you have to tell someone."
I know, kind of crazy, right? I mean, deathbed confession. And not only this, but after a number of years, police found a photograph of John with his ticket. And the ticket was never stamped, which means he never went on that train. Then, all the way in 2008, headlines were made again when a breakthrough occurred in the Maria Ridulph cold case. Now, Jake McAuliffe, then known as John Tessier, was brought in. And the murder of Maria Ridulph was believed to be solved in 2012 when he was convicted of the crime. And this conviction mainly came because Kathy and her testimony of remembering Johnny, who was John Tessier, and later changed his name to Jack McAuliffe. Plus, Jack also had a couple of run-ins of the law, being accused a couple times of sexual assault, and it seemed like this case would finally just be closed, and the oldest cold case ever of 50 plus years would be finally put to rest. The intel and the information were finally coming to a close. Well, that's the story that would have been told to you, like I said, up until about 7 or 8 years ago. Because the twists keep coming. In the decades-old tragedy, as it turns out, McAuliffe was wrongly imprisoned for a crime that he did not commit. And McAuliffe got out of prison in 2016, and the charges against him were dropped. And with Jack McAuliffe innocent, Maria Ridulph's case is once again open, and her murder remains unsolved. Now, maybe they really did get it wrong, and John was not the killer. But 11 days after Maria went missing, he did join the military, moved to Washington State, and became a policeman in Lacey, which is a town east of Olympia. So at the end of the day, why things were overturned in court and why he is innocent is because the evidence didn't line up. And that photograph that was shown to Kathy, as we talked about earlier, how Kathy was an important part, that's because she saw a photograph and said, "Yep, that's Johnny, that's who I saw." Well, that photograph that was shown to Kathy that pinned John as the suspect was quote-unquote suggestive in the extreme. Now, this means most likely she was given information prior that, hey, that's the person of interest. Make sure to pick him. So now, because of the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine and many other doctrines, this would, as you know, be void, nullified in court, not admissible, whatever you want to say. So the legal system, basically, if Johnny is the killer, which, Johnny, no stamp ticket, alibi falls apart. If he really is the killer, this was a serious miscarriage of justice because he still belongs in prison for what probably he did, which is probably killing Maria. We know she was found 90 miles away. And, a case like this is just so sad because such a little girl who has her whole life ahead of her, you would think the least we could do for her is find her damn killer. So yes, this case still remains open, and we will be going through it on Detective Work, a series of live streaming that I will be dropping soon after Hell Week. So do your research, because we need in this circumstance to catch a killer.
Welcome to KO Stories, where I tell stories about true crime, missing people, and the paranormal. As of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own.